Gumbo, barbecue, grits, fried chicken. What if I told you the food that defines America wasn't born in a fancy kitchen, but on plantations and rice fields and over fire pits built by enslaved Africans? That, what we call American cuisine, is at its root a story of survival, resistance, and revolution. This video is about more than recipes. It's about how people of African descent across the Americas transformed the way we eat, turning scraps into delicacies, memories into flavor, and pain into creativity. From the US South to Brazil, from rice paddies to city kitchens, African descended communities built food cultures that are not only delicious but profoundly political. This is the story of culinary revolution rooted in struggle made possible through polycultural collaboration. Hi, you're in class with Dr. T. Let's start with a myth that the food of enslaved people was just quote unquote slave food, a bland, forced imitation of better meals. Not true. What we call soul food today, smothered greens, fried catfish, okra stew, owes its flavor to traditions developed under the harshest conditions. But these meals weren't just about filling bellies, they were about preserving memory. They were about resistance. Soul food is not the same as the food enslaved people ate daily. It's more like the grandchild of it. Enslaved people often ate what they could grow, gather, or receive as rations. But the cooking methods, flavor, principles, and ingredients, those were African. In West and Central Africa, people already used techniques like fermentation, stewing, and smoking. They cooked with ingredients like yam, cowpeas, okra, cinnamon, palm oil, and hot peppers. When they were forced across the Atlantic, they brought that knowledge with them, literally in their minds, and sometimes in seeds braided into their hair. But African foodways didn't stay African. They met Native American crops, corn, beans, squash, and European tools and meats. In this cultural collision, a new cuisine was born. Part African, part Native, part European, but truly polycultural. What is polyculturalism? It's not about blending everything into sameness. It's about preserving difference and building bridges across it. Enslaved cooks took indigenous corn and used African techniques to make grits, hoe cakes, and cornbread. They used French cast iron pots to cook one-pot stews like gumbo. They added bitter greens to indigenous beans. In Brazil, they mixed West African palm oil with Portuguese bacalhau. In the Caribbean, they mashed plantains in wooden mortars, added Spanish onions, and cooked it in African oils. Call it culinary jazz. Each ingredient brings its own voice, but together they make something new. People often think the food of enslaved people was about getting by, but it was also about getting creative. They seasoned what little meat they had, offal feet, neck bones with layers of flavor. They understood heat, bitterness, and umami before most Americans had names for them. They fermented, preserved, stewed, and fried, and they created taste memories that we still carry today. Ever wonder why American cuisine is obsessed with quote unquote comfort food? That's not a coincidence. Comfort was built into the very foundation of African descended cooking. Because when everything else was taken away, food was one thing people could still control. This was not just a Southern story. Across the Americas, African descended people revolutionized cuisine. In Bahia, enslaved women, that's Bahia, Brazil, enslaved women created moqueca, vatupá, arequipe, dishes that define Brazil. In Colombia and Panama, Afro-descended people invented coconut rice and stews. In the Caribbean, they gave us calalu, jerk seasoning, and salt fish with ackee. In each region, they blended what they brought with what they found and made it better. And here's the twist. African descended people didn't just transform their own kitchens, they reshaped everyone's. Southern whites couldn't live without pepper vinegars or barbecue. Native Americans adopted watermelons, cowpeas, and sweet potatoes grown by black farmers. Even elite European recipes like those in early American cookbooks show African influence in their flavor profiles. Gumbo, barbecue, macaroni pie, and rices with beans. These are not just American dishes. They're part of an Afro-Atlantic exchange. How did a cuisine born in captivity become national identity? Because the people who made it were not just cooks, they were cultural engineers. They were forced to cook for others, but they fed themselves spiritually and emotionally through food. Their hands built the table, but their minds set it. Even the idea of American hospitality, the long Sunday meal, the spicy condiments, the rich stews, come from African and Native American traditions that centered communal eating and generosity. Today, the descendants of these culinary geniuses still carry the legacy, but some of these foods are dying, not because they taste bad, because they're culturally endangered. That's why reenactment, preservation, and storytelling matters. It's why people like culinary historian Michael Tweedy plant African crops, cook with historic methods, and revive lost recipes, not to romanticize the past, but to remind us that food is history, food is memory, and food is power. So what's the takeaway? African descended people didn't just adapt to food systems, they transformed them. They took what was meant to control them and turned it into a cultural identity and beauty. They helped create not just Southern food, not just soul food, but American food. And they did it by collaborating across African nations with indigenous peoples through colonial contradictions. That's polyculturalism. So the next time you sit down to fry okra, a pot of rice and peas, or cornbread with syrup, remember, you're eating a revolution. If you found this video meaningful, please hit that like button and subscribe. Share it with someone who loves food and history and wants to know where their favorite meals really come from. But now we want to hear from you. What's a dish from your family or culture that tells a bigger story? Let's share. Drop it in your comments. Please drop knowledge on me and tell me some history. This is a collective effort. Thank you.